Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So you have tennis mom tonight.
Oh, I love.
Um, my daughter plays tennis and she got moved up a group last week. So she plays an hour and a half now on a Monday. So instead of being at home where I expected to be, I'm with my tea in a car.
Well, thank you very much for joining me still, even when your daughter's playing tennis. So have we got a new young superstar on our hands in a few years' time?
I've no idea. She loves the tennis. She loves the swimming. She loves the bike riding. She's just a very active little girl, which is obviously what you want. So we're just letting her lead us where she'd like to go. And when her tennis teacher said, "Would you like to move into the squad?" There's three girls who've been working super hard during lockdown at home on their tennis skills, all self-led.
Yeah.
And he wanted to reward them, so they've moved up together, which is really lovely, as they're all the same age. But for 7-year-olds, it's quite daunting. Well, certainly is for me as mom, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, wowza. Well, she's got a bit of a superstar mummy, so I'm sure she's destined for greatness in whatever field she goes into. But good on her. Make sure you give her my congratulations.
Yeah,
Um,
I will do. She's been. I just went inside and had a check on her. She's been running around and she looks well happy. So hopefully, this first session of an hour and a half, she'll sleep well tonight.
Oh, well, that's also a bonus, isn't it? I'm not sure. It's been raining everywhere I've been today. What's it like where you are?
Well, I was planning to be on the edge of a tennis court, so I
Oh,
could wish you round and do your tour. But unfortunately, I'm in the car because it's raining. It's only just started though, so I was fortunate I could get out on my bike earlier. We could have a swim, and now, yeah, tennis is indoors, thankfully.
oh, that is a good sign, to be fair. But I'm pleased that you're still able to join me. So thank you very much. I honestly really, really appreciate your time. And I don't know whether you saw, but I have actually bought a new set of
Oh,
because Dame Sarah Storey, I am in the presence of sporting greatness. Uh, when I was doing a bit more, research into your incredible sporting career, I was honestly in awe. So for everyone else, you are GB's longest-serving athlete at the current time. You are the most successful British female Paralympian of all time, having won a remarkable 14 Paralympic gold over 7 games. I think that's just remarkable in itself. But the 7 games are also worth noting that they're in different sports. So 4 were in swimming, 3 were in cycling, which is just superhuman if you ask me. Also, 38 world titles and 76 world records. I think the numbers speak for themselves. So I really do think that this is definitely destined for today. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. So thank you so much.
oh, it's lovely to be with you, and thank you for having me on. It's funny when it's all read out in one scoop, as it were. I found out the other day there's a gymnast who's been competing in every single games that I've done as well,
Wow.
in gymnastics for 7 games, hoping to go to Tokyo for her 8th games. Although she's a couple of years older than me, so she's but yeah, there's not many of us who've managed to hang on for this long. So hopefully I hang on for another year. Today's actually the 24th year anniversary of my third Paralympic gold medal in the 200-meter individual medley in Atlanta. So I only just realised that as I was watching my daughter play tennis, and she'd just done her own individual medley in the pool
Oh,
before a tennis lesson. I was like, that's quite appropriate. She does her first individual medley on the anniversary of my gold medal in the event in Atlanta.
wow. What a special, special day. And cheers to that as well. I mean,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely remarkable. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to be picking your brains a lot over the next half an hour. But I've got a very important question to ask you to kick things off. And some would say it's the most important question that I can ask you. And that's how the Dame Sarah Storey like her tea. Okay? So
yep,
I'm going to do this by asking you 5 quick fire questions, if that's all right.
yep.
Okay? So you ready? Okay. Question 1, breakfast tea or herbal tea?
Breakfast tea.
Yorkshire, Twinings, or Earl Grey?
Yorkshire.
Milk, sugar, or neither?
Just milk.
Okay. A digestive, hobnob, or ginger nut biscuit?
Chocolate digestive.
Right. Okay. And final one, does tea taste better when made by yourself or made by someone else?
By me.
Yeah, always. Okay. Very interesting. To be fair, I would have to agree with you on that last one. I think it's a bit risky asking someone else to make you a cup of tea, but
To be fair to Barney, my husband, he's not a tea drinker, and I've taught him to make a really nice cup of tea, as long as it's dark enough. My mum and I like chalk and cheese when it comes to tea. She likes a milk pudding, and I like more like a builder's tea. So yeah, bit different.
You've taught your husband well, then, I can see.
Yes, thankfully.
Very cool. I had a similar conversation with Claire Balding a couple of weeks ago, actually, and she said that she has her wife make a cup of tea first thing in the morning. It's a daily tradition, so it's good to hear that you're doing the same with Barney.
Yeah, well, we're coffee drinkers in the morning, and then I tend to switch to tea towards the afternoon.
Well, that's fair enough. Okay, well, fair enough. I feel like now we can kick things off because we know how Dame Sarah Storey likes it. So I pre-warned you that I asked all of my cover and natter guests 3 questions, okay? And considering this series is an Olympic and Paralympic Games special, I think I've asked every single one of my guests the same first question, okay? So similar to yourself, having trained every day for the last 4 years in the build-up to what should have been this summer, it's going to be a bit of a waste of time if we don't carry on talking about what should have been, okay? So this question could be quite tricky, considering, as you said, you've been participating in Paralympic Games every single time since the Barcelona 92 Games. But if you had to pick one memory or moment or highlight of any Paralympic or Olympic Games, doesn't matter whether you're participating or not, what would be the standout one for yourself?
I am so struggling, and I've known about this question for a few days, and it's so hard. I think for me, the very first memory I have is of 1984 in Los Angeles. And when I was a kid, I used to have this special spot. I would always sit for 2 weeks straight watching the Olympics, because the Paralympics wasn't on telly in those days. And so I suppose my favourite memory of the Olympics is just that spot at my parents' house, as close to the screen as I was allowed to be, just taking it all in and watching amazing people. At those games, Sarah Hardcastle was a silver and bronze medalist as a 15-year-old. And because we had the same name, I just absolutely loved the idea that I could be a Sarah and go to a games 8 years later, watching the likes of Seb Coe, Tessa Sanderson, and just then moving on to each of the other games and watching other people. But that spot in my mum and dad's living room is still there. It's still mine. I can take it. And so that's where I would be if I'm at home. And normally I'm now on a pre-games training camp for myself. But if I'm at home and the Olympics is on, that's my favourite spot. And I sit there and think about all the different Olympic memories that I've watched from that little spot.
Yeah, I bet that's quite special as well. That actually, obviously, I'm exactly the same. Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, mad. I will watch it hands down. I spend, a month just sitting in front of the TV. But for yourself, back then, obviously, when you were younger and watching the Paralympic Games, did you ever think, actually, fast forward a few years and that'll be you participating?
Well, in '84, I didn't know the Paralympics existed.
Yeah.
And in that year, the Paralympic Games was in New York for the athletes that could walk, and the wheelchair athletes were in Stoke Mandeville because the American organisers didn't want the Paralympics in Los Angeles. So Seoul Paralympics was probably the first time it was held on more of a par than more of a way that we're kind of used to now. But it wasn't until Barcelona in '92 that there was any proper TV coverage. So when I was watching the Olympics and not knowing the Paralympics existed, I dreamed that 8 years later I'd be at those games wherever they were going to be. And that was kind of my my sole ambition as a child, to be a GB athlete. And my parents said, well, have you got a backup plan? What happens if that doesn't work? I said, well, I'll be a PE teacher.
Yeah.
So it was kind of that one thing that I just wanted to do from watching those games in '84. That's just all I wanted to be.
Wow. I mean, and to be honest, you saying that how watching in '84 had that impact on yourself, over the last decade and beyond, you have had exactly the same impact, not just on young girls called Sarah, but the whole nation. And and obviously this summer could have been your eighth games. You entered the year in fine form at the World Championships, winning another 3 golds and 1 bronze. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously hitting fine form. How has the postponement of the games, changed obviously your next year of your life? Are you still gunning for that 8th Paralympic Games next summer?
Yeah, I'm still very much hoping to be there. I think that's the thing. You get things thrown in your way that you have to overcome, little hurdles. This is a bigger hurdle than anyone could have anticipated. But when we watched that, the horrific nature of this virus spreading across the globe, it was the sensible decision we couldn't go to Japan this year. So I kind of expected it to change, but I was delighted it wasn't just completely taken, called off, because we've never had a postponed games until now, and hopefully it still can go ahead. So yeah, it's one of those things that you never ever can prepare for, because you just don't ever know it's going to happen, and you just have to kind of keep going and focus on the things you can control. So for most of us, as you know, that's being fit and healthy, making sure that you stay safe, stay healthy, and if you are one of those unfortunate people who gets the virus, following all of the things you need to do, because there's so much that we're learning about it all the time, and the after effects of having had it, or maybe having had it. There's a few people reporting post-viral fatigue and things like that. So you have to be super aware of what's going on with your body. And I think as athletes, we're probably well placed for that. We're constantly assessing and reassessing how we feel. But for me, lockdown, I've just been trying to, maintain that fitness, build the form that I can. No idea when I'm going to race outside again. All the local events to me have been cancelled. So each event, I think that's the event, and then it goes and gets cancelled. So I'm really hoping I'll get one event in October. So I've just got to keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, I mean, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. We're in exactly the same boat in terms of the international hockey schedule. We're supposed to be playing in October, but as you said, you just don't know and you can't predict, can you? And it's as you said, in terms of controlling what you can. And I think as athletes, that's part and parcel of it all, isn't it, really? And I guess that kind of moves me on quite nicely to my next question. Now, I touched upon you've been to numerous Paralympic Games, but you've done a bit of the unknown in terms of participating in 2 different sports. So in 2005, you made that transition from swimming to cycling. So how did that come about? And also, how easy was that to make the transition? Because they are 2 quite different sports.
So I started cycling as a fun thing to do after the games in Athens. I'd commuted from when I was doing my A-levels. I was at a sixth form college in a place called Marple, and I went from the college down to my swim training. And then because it was a hill up home, my dad had picked me up on his way back from work, stick the bike on the bike carrier. So I'd use my bike to kind of help me around at college, but I didn't learn to ride on the velodrome until 2004 after the end of the games. And then after a stint in Australia during the winter, I got back home and I'd picked up an ear infection while I was away. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just go back to the velodrome and keep fit on my bike. And then that ear infection just kept extending and extending. And eventually I got to the point where I was fed up of not being allowed to swim. And I went to the an event in America, and I knew I had an ear infection as soon as I arrived. But I waited till I got home about 2 weeks later, and the doctors were like, right, you've got to stop swimming. You're allowed to swim when your ears are completely better, but we don't know when that is. So I was like, oh, no, you can't do this to me. I need to race. It's the Commonwealth Games trials and all this. So eventually I decided to just go back to the velodrome and just keep riding in circles. And British Cycling spotted me and asked me if I'd like to do a trial over 3,000 metres. And the anniversary of my very first international event was last week on the 14th of August. And on the 14th of August, I got to race at the European Championships in Alkmaar over 3,000 metres on a track bike. And I won the race. I broke the world record. And it was a decision then to decide whether I was going to stay in cycling or move into cycling or stay in swimming. Wow. And I took a bit of time to make the decision. And I eventually decided, with the help of my amazing swimming coach at the time, Colin Hood, that I was probably getting a bit old as a swimmer, especially as I'd started so young. So, yeah, I officially switched sports on the 1st of October 2005. And it proved to be a good decision.
Well, yeah, and the rest is history, some would say. I mean, it's just incredible because, like, I don't know, as a sports fan, you could kind of see a transition between two similar sports. So, like, badminton and tennis, or similar sports like that. But actually, swimming and cycling couldn't be any different in terms of what they need. Have you seen any similarities in terms of, you know, from when you started in the swimming pool? Was there skills that you could pass on into your cycling career, do you think?
Well, I think the main similarities were the amount of training and that endurance aspect that I had. But the cycling events are a lot longer. So my shortest event in cycling, my shortest events on the track are similar to swimming. When you move out onto the road, the longest event I would do as a swimmer was about 5 minutes. Whereas now, you know, the events are short on the road if they're like 20 minutes in length. So I have a completely different physiology, I think, I've developed as I've got that little bit older. And that's actually quite normal in cycling. You can develop a really a stamina-based physiology a lot easier in your 30s than perhaps you can in other sports. So I think that fell in my favour. But you're right, it's completely different. You go from being in that lovely streamlined position, can't do it in the car, in the swimming pool, to being in this tucked up position for the time trial and on the track bike. And that took me a long time to get used to, because I would think I was super low on my bike, and actually I wasn't at all. And this horrible, horrible photograph of me at the Games in 2008, and I won the individual pursuit, but I was so un-aero, it was unbelievable.
Really?
And people are laughing at me, like, how did you manage to win in that position? But I was still kind of developing. I think the other differences are just the skill base. You're in your own lane in swimming. You don't have to worry about anybody else. Whereas there's so many events in cycling where you're in a bunch. So that took me back a little bit to my days as a cross-country runner at school, and you get your elbows out. You have to be shoulder to shoulder with people and not, you know, not be afraid of that bumping and jostling that can happen. But I think, you know, it was just a completely different challenge. And I had my now husband sat on the sofa every night to ask questions, and he was just, you know, a huge, huge influence in me being able to successfully switch. And all those things that I've learned, it's funny to think that it is now 15 years, because I still do sometimes think of myself and as a swimmer, and I still have dreams about swimming races. And I think, you know, it's interesting that I've been a cyclist definitely for longer than I was a swimmer. And most people forget or didn't even realize that I did start as a swimmer and wasn't a cyclist as a kid. And there was lots of things that kids do on bikes, junior gears, where you're restricted on the gear size. So you learn to pedal really fast, which I never obviously got to do because I was in a pool. So there was lots of skills that were missing that I had to find ways as an adult to kind of replace. And I think we did that successfully because, that pedaling efficiency is something that I'm able to do now.
It's just, honestly, it's incredible because there, as you said, there is so many differences in terms of like the technique, but obviously the thing that remains the same is the dedication, the hard work that it takes to reach the top. And I think, as I said, for you to achieve all you have in swimming is absolutely remarkable. But to do that again in a sport that's completely different is just superhuman. But it's really interesting, and I'm sure you have your husband to thank for his top tips. But you know, now that you've achieved so much, I'm sure that you can, you know, vice versa, you can compare notes in terms of that. But it's really interesting. But obviously, with all the stuff that you have achieved, both in swimming and cycling, that has helped to inspire so many people in the nation. And you've held numerous ambassadorial roles throughout your sporting career. Most noticeably for me, the Active Travel Commissioner of Sheffield, which is amazing. And also you've set up your own cycling team called Storey Racing, and also the Boot Out Breast Cancer Cycling Club, which, I mean, reading about it is honestly incredible. And it's all about, you know, aiming to raise the participation in cycling, getting people to enjoy the sport. And through that, obviously, you're inspiring so many people. But to flip things on their head, obviously, you've inspired so many, but who would you say has had the biggest impact or influence on your sporting career so far?
I think my parents are my biggest influence. You know, if it wasn't for them taking me training as a kid, enabling me to make those decisions that I made about my career and supporting me with those decisions, You know, they still follow me around the world. And now they've got their grandchildren in tow. They've not missed an event. They've always tried to be there regardless. You know, my dad came to the Commonwealth Games in Delhi. My mum was at home because my sister had a baby the day I arrived. But they've never missed an event. One or both of them has always been there. My dad has this amazing little book with all the times in it and all the details of every event that I've ever raced in. And he used to joke that he only ever saw my races through the lens of a black and white video camera. But yeah, without their influence, without their support, you know, they'll still make dinner for us now, and they look after the kids almost every day, and they're a massive part of our life. So yeah, they're my biggest influence and my biggest cheerleaders. And you know, the way they get on, Barney, you know, they're just a big, just it's amazing. It's hard to put into words when, you know, it all clicks together, and you just feel like it was always meant to be in this way. And you know, they adore Barney, and in the same way that I do, they just think it's amazing that I found someone who could support my career ambitions even after he stopped racing.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, it probably speaks for itself, but they probably are so incredibly proud of you. And in terms of, you know, your life now, it's come a full circle because you're doing exactly the same for your two children. So all definitely runs through the family. But can I ask you one thing? So as your parents, obviously you said that they travel the world watching you compete. What was their reaction when you said, I'm going to change from swimming to cycling? What was their reaction?
I think my dad said, "Oh, I've only just got to grips with the rules in swimming." And then they kind of seen it coming a little bit. They were very curious by the fact I'd introduced Barney to them as my mechanic, because he'd helped me with my bike setup. In fact, he's in charge of bikes all the time. But no, they were just thrilled to see, you know, me challenging myself in a different way. And because we had success immediately, they were like, oh, okay. They'd not expected it, but in many ways it didn't surprise them because I'd done so many sports as a kid. And I'd been on the county team for netball. I'd, you know, played table tennis to county level, national level, and cross country at English schools. So we'd always been a family that travelled about to do different sports. And I remember when I was at high school going from morning swim training to a cross country race and then to a table tennis tournament almost every Saturday, before flaking out, you know. So they were quite used to this multi-sport idea. And they, you know, they've just followed the same mantra that I'm hopefully follow with Louisa and Charlie, is that, you know, if you're happy, then that's the best thing you can be.
Yeah, I mean, here, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, as I said, I'm sure they're hugely proud of all that you have achieved. And I'm sure it's been even more special for them being able to watch you perform on the highest stage in person. So cheers to them, and obviously them being your biggest influences. I feel like I've fired a lot of questions at you so far, and I have been bombarded by people on social media with questions. So would you mind if I ask a few
That's
questions?
fine, yeah.
Okay. So Mark on Instagram has asked, what is your favourite hobby outside of sport?
I don't really have any.
Nah,
Sports just, yeah, I don't have anything. I like to bake a cake with the kids, if that counts. But yeah, we've just been away for a few days in the motorhome, so we find places we can go to ride our bikes. So even if it's not formal training, you know, the four of us are on our bikes doing stuff. So yeah, it's sport all the way, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. Okay, this is a good question. So Tilly wants to know, if you could be a Paralympic champion at one other sport, considering that most people would be happy with one, let alone two. So if you could be a Paralympic champion at one other sport, what would it be and why?
Oh,
Tricky.
Cross-country skiing.
Oh,
I've never tried it before, so that would be interesting.
very interesting. I mean, have you been skiing before, or is it a complete stab in the dark?
No, I've never ridden a track bike before, so yeah, skiing, maybe. Don't know.
Let's be honest, you've riddled off a lot of sports that you've done in your lifetime, and it sounds like you smashed every single one. So I think skiing, well, you never know. We could be seeing Dame Sarah Storey make her debut in the Winter Paralympics.
Who knows now? I don't know if I'd survive. I don't know if I'd survive the cold. I'm pretty good in the heat.
And me, warm weather. Okay, time for one more if this is all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Next year, would you, sorry, this is from Sally. Next year, would you rather become the most successful British Paralympian of all time? And I think it's 16, is it, the record at the moment?
Yeah, a swimmer called Mike Kenny, who lives in Salford. He won 16 gold medals as a swimmer in the 70s and 80s.
All right, okay. So Sally wants to know, would you rather surpass Mike Kenny's record or your beloved Manchester United win the Premier League?
I'm sorry, they could win it every year. You can only do the Paralympics once every 4.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that probably is a no-brainer. But what is happening with Manchester United?
Ollie needs to sort them out, I think. They did well. They were doing well in lockdown. They came out fighting, and then it's a tricky one, isn't it? They need to they need to get their act together and get back to the heady days of the treble in 1999.
Living in the glory days, aren't
Yeah.
you? It's one of those, as you said, you know, you're going to make history next year. I can see it now, but Ollie's got to sort it out for the other years. So, Sally, I hope that answers your question. Okay, this is an interesting one, and I actually wanted to ask this, but Sandra would like to know, do you prefer competing on the track or on the road?
I actually do more road racing than track racing because it's just more available. So I suppose the road really. Road events are a bit longer as well, and the road time trial is great. The track events are good, but the training for the track is fairly monotonous. The road events, most people think I'm more of a track rider, but I consider myself a road rider.
Yeah, I mean, both are pretty brutal in my opinion.
And some of the places we've raced on the road are just amazing. One of my favourite routes is Lake Tahoe. We had the Tour of California. Stage 1 used to be a lap of that lake and then finish up on a mountain. And I tried my hardest to win the stage with a breakaway altitude as well. So it suited me. But yeah, I've not quite made it. And then unfortunately, the Tour of California is no more at the moment because of the changes to funding sponsorship regulations. But yeah, so that was a really, really cool race to do. So yeah, the road is probably my favourite.
But I mean, this probably is a silly question, but if you are riding in, you know, beautiful views and scenic roads, do you ever get like distracted and, you know, focus on, you know, the fantastic views ahead of you rather than actually the roads?
No, because normally you'll have done some kind of recce to check out the sections so that you have a plan and you can kind of pick out targets on the road, so you know that if you're going to make an attack or you're going to know where the wind's coming from to make a team attack. So you'll have done a recce. So we get all the nice pictures on the days beforehand. And then, yeah, you can concentrate in race day.
The tricks and trades of the pro, I guess. That's why but yeah, very interesting. Okay, well, I'm very appreciative of your time. I'm aware that I promised you 30 minutes and my mug of tea is empty.
Yeah.
My new mug of tea, that is. But all I have left to say is thank you so much for your time. I honestly really appreciate it. I could literally talk to you for hours.
Oh no, thank you for having me on. It's great. My mug is also empty. And we haven't been interrupted by the post tennis lesson kiddie chaos. So yeah, we've done well. I was worried that we might end up being turfed out the car because they were back.
Oh, I think the limelight could have been passed on to your daughter if that was the case. So you know, but please pass on my congratulations to her for her, you know, fantastic tennis skills that she's obviously showing right now.
I will do. Yeah, she's loving it, and Charlie can't wait to join. He knows he's got to be 3 before he can join tennis, and he keeps telling the tennis coach that he'll be starting as soon as he's 3. So he's booked himself in for November.
Good on him. Well, I'm sure the most supportive, inspiring mother will be on the sideline every step of the way, as your mum was for you. So good luck to them all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again. And everyone else, thank you very much for joining us. My next Cuppa and Natter guest will be revealed on Thursday at 6 p.m. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But in the meantime, keep that kettle boiled, keep nattering using #Cuppa and Natter, and I'll see you same time, same place next Monday. Thank you so much, Dame Sarah Storey. You
Thanks,
absolutely.
Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.